It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the asylum seekers living under the radar in the UK, even after their applications to stay are rejected. We'll have a special report for you inside the asylum crisis, as Home Office data reveals 2/3 of those told to go home actually stay here. And with no support from the government, they're left to rely on charities as they struggle to get by. Coming up, I'll be joined by our communities correspondent Becky Johnson, who's been speaking to failed asylum seekers in Hull, one of whom has been here for 18 years. Also tonight, children being let down by NHS gender services. A damning report finds there is remarkably weak evidence to support medical gender treatment for children. And the toxic debate means that NHS staff are scared to openly discuss transgender issues. Plus, the Team GB athletes who could be in for a cool $50,000 if they win gold at the Paris Olympics. And I'll speak to the author who's just released her 4th book, with all the proceeds going to tackle homelessness. And she's only 11 years old. All that to come and much more here on the UK Tonight. We start the programme tonight with the crisis in the UK's asylum system, with thousands of people who've had their asylum claims rejected remaining here and living under the radar. Home Office data shows that 2/3 of those people refused asylum were not recorded as having left the UK between 2011 and 2021. Sky News has obtained details of a convicted sex offender who was allowed to stay in Britain because the nature of his crimes posed a risk to his safety in Afghanistan. Our communities correspondent Becky Johnson has this special report from Hull.
These are some of Britain's failed asylum seekers.
18 years of being rejected, and no one from the government has ever told you have to leave the UK?
No.
But why are they still in the country?
People would think if they've refused asylum, you would be forced to go back.
No one forced me.
We've met people who are able to make claim after claim.
How many times have you applied for asylum?
5 times.
5 times?
Yes.
So how does the system allow it?
It costs a lot of money to deport people, so they're left in a situation of limbo.
We find out how often Home Office refusals are overturned by judges, giving asylum seekers hope.
We are a future of Britannia.
And go inside one of the legal firms that fights against the government.
The asylum system is broken. That's the reality of it.
These people are waiting to be let into this church in Hull. Many of them are in the country illegally. Failed asylum seekers aren't entitled to any help from the state. Once a week, a charity hands out basics here.
How many people do you give parcels to?
Today we've only had 52 because it's pouring with rain. But very often it's 70 or 80 a week, just for the food. Well, just for food parcels. People come and they can choose 8 items.
Mustafa's come to collect his and asked us not to film his face.
You know, like there is rice here, tea, and spaghetti.
And that's all you have to live on?
Yeah.
How do you manage?
I manage that.
He came to the UK in 2016.
I'm from Iraq.
And a lorry over from France?
Of course, you're from Calais.
But his asylum claim was rejected.
It's interesting because people would think if they've refused asylum, you would be forced to go back.
No one forced me. Just, ask me if you want. They sent me a letter. If you want to go back, we will help you.
He took us over the road to show us the park where he's been living.
Where do you sleep then?
I tell you, any punch here. Sometimes I sit inside for 3-4 hours because there is heater.
Do you have a sleeping bag?
No.
What, just in your coat?
He can get hot meals at the church. And as well as food and warmth, there's advice on offer here too.
What's your current status? You're an asylum seeker?
Yes.
Which country?
Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah. We've got about 300 people, possibly 400 people now, that are refused asylum seekers that are just surviving, you know, under the radar in this city.
In Hull alone?
In Hull alone. We've got a lot.
Where are they? How are they living?
You could be going to a nail bar and the person that's actually doing your nails might actually be a refused asylum seeker that's been exploited. They're hidden all over the place, hidden in plain sight.
But many of them have been refused. Should they not just be sent home?
It costs a lot of money to deport people, so they're left in a situation of limbo. Quite often, after a few attempts, they do get status.
It's why they survive how they can and don't give up. Sakile is one of the volunteers here to register people as they arrive. But as we got chatting, she told me she herself has been in the country illegally for 18 years.
How did you end up in Hull?
It's the Home Office from 2006. I've been in Hull.
How many times have you applied for asylum?
I think 5 times.
5 times?
Yes.
When was your latest one rejected, the most recent?
16th of January.
It means she survives on the same basics as everyone else here. She agreed to show us where she's been living.
Is this the life that you dreamed of when you came all those years ago?
No. I never dreamt of this life.
But despite all the rejections, she's never been threatened with deportation.
They just send letters and ask you if you want to go voluntarily. You need to tell them.
Do you think that's surprising?
Yes, it is surprising.
And yet she's not alone. In the decade to 2020, almost 2/3 of people refused asylum were not recorded as having left the UK. That's more than 55,000 people. With no legal right to work or benefits, Sakile's room in this hostel is paid for by charity. She's lived here since 2011. She came from Zimbabwe in 2006, leaving her 2 sons, then aged just 10 and 7, with her parents.
Have you seen them since you left?
No. I haven't seen anyone.
Did you come here to try to create a better life and bring them over?
Yes, that was my idea, to be safe and then apply for my kids in a lawful way to bring them and be with me.
And now you've missed their childhoods.
Yeah.
What has that done to you?
Mentally, really, it's disturbed me a lot. I'm not myself. Though I've got a very bad moments whereby I would just want to say, why am I living? Why don't I just end my life? But there's that thing that everything's going to be okay one day.
Do you regret coming to the UK?
No, I don't regret it, really. And I'm hoping one day I'll get everything sorted.
It's a hope shared by others going through Britain's asylum system, and with good reason. Refusals are rarely final. When the Home Office rejects someone's asylum claim, it sends a letter detailing the reasons why. But then it goes on to explain in some detail how to appeal against that decision. And we can reveal that since 2021, just over half of appeals have been successful, leading to Home Office refusals being overturned. Appeals are decided by judges in immigration tribunal courts around the country, and lawyers for asylum seekers go up against the Home Office. The successful appeal case of this man, Abdul Yazidi, a convicted sex offender from Afghanistan, caused public outrage. He went on to attack a woman and 2 children with a chemical in Clapham after being granted asylum by a judge after the minister who baptised him persuaded the court Yazidi had converted to Christianity and would therefore be at risk of persecution if he went home. Back at the church in Hull, they also get asylum seekers asking to be baptised.
We have some who actually, would decide to have a faith and decide to become Christians, and the church is open to receiving and welcoming those people. We do this about 2 or 3 times in a year when we get a set of people who wanted to be converted.
A group of people will be baptised?
A group of people will be baptized.
Do you think that they genuinely want to become Christians, or do you think that this helps support their asylum application?
It's one I don't want to comment on per se, but I believe everyone has got their reasons why they want to be converted. It could be genuine, it could be for other reasons, but we as a church, open hand of welcome. We do it, and then we wait for the repercussion of what happens after.
It raises questions on the role churches play. But a change in religion is just one of many reasons an appeal can be successful. We've come to London to a meeting of Persian LGBT, an organisation that supports gay asylum seekers.
Ricky, another successes, okay? We are happy, we are glad.
The man on the left has recently been granted asylum.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. We are a future of Britannia.
Many here make the argument they'd face persecution in their home countries because of their sexuality. Ali's claim was recently refused, but he's still confident he'll be able to stay.
So this was the rejection letter?
Yeah, this is the rejection letter, and here is the right of appeal, you see.
So with the appeal, obviously you're going in front of a judge instead of the Home Office.
Absolutely.
Do you feel that you've got a better chance of success?
I'm so hopeful, yeah. Because I have some friends in community, they got their visa status, so I'm
After appeal?
Yeah, after appeal. I have 1 or 2 friends they got, so my
you see it as a good chance?
Yeah, it's a good chance.
And Mansour is hoping it'll be third time lucky for him. He's been rejected twice, but now has a new lawyer.
I changed my first lawyer because he was not that much good. Because of him, maybe I'm suffering.
Is it all about getting a good lawyer?
Yeah.
There's a whole legal industry based around fighting cases on behalf of asylum seekers. On average, over £34 million of legal aid per year has been spent on asylum cases since 2017. This is one of the leading firms in London that frequently takes on the Home Office and wins.
A large part of any immigration practice, we see lots of very bad decisions made at first instance. And if firms have the capacity and the funding to take appeals on, they will do so.
Sometimes even an appeal can be appealed, and these court documents reveal some of those cases. Westernisation is one reason successfully argued. When people have been here so long, they say they can't go back. And this is the extraordinary case of another convicted sex offender who continues to act inappropriately towards women, but was allowed to stay in Britain because committing sexual acts in public in Afghanistan would put him at high risk of physical violence from mob mentality. He was represented by this firm, but the top lawyer in the company disputes any suggestion that so-called lefty lawyers are to blame for the asylum crisis.
The asylum system is broken. That's the reality of it.
But when we have lawyers who go to tribunals and argue that convicted sex offenders, who the government has turned down, should be allowed to remain in Britain, that's part of the problem, isn't it?
Lawyers only work within the system created, our own justice system. Now you've got a government who makes the laws, who runs the system, who makes the decisions, but somehow it's lawyers? I mean, come on.
And consider this, even if the court hadn't ruled in this sex offender's favour, the UK isn't currently deporting people back to Afghanistan anyway, since the Taliban took over. The truth is, the whole asylum process takes so long that by the time all appeals are exhausted, many people have found a reason to make a fresh application. And back here in Hull, that's what Mustafa's doing. As we were filming, he found out a new claim he submitted is now being processed. He's arguing his circumstances have changed because his health is deteriorating.
My knee and my shoulder, back stress.
8 years after arriving in Britain, he's back at the start of the process.
I think so many people will wonder why you choose this life, sleeping on this bench, over going home.
Because I told you, maybe it will, that for a while, maybe it will be changed, especially when I get the fresh claim that gives me a hope.
So you just keep hoping?
Of course, because without hope, we can't live.
And Sakile also plans to have another go in a system that hasn't forced her to leave, but instead keeps allowing her to try again to stay.
So you prefer this life over returning home?
Yes.
Is it the
that's my
hope that one day you'll
Yes.
get asylum that keeps you going?
Yes, that's my hope.
Her decision to stay is one many will find hard to understand, but she can because no one's forcing her to leave. And even if the UK government succeeds in sending people to Rwanda, under the current policy, no one we've met while making this film is at risk of being put on a plane because they've already been in the country too long.
Just want to bring you some breaking news we're getting from France. We're hearing that one person has been killed and at least one other person has been wounded in a knife attack in the city of Bordeaux. This is coming from French media. French media also saying that the attacker has been killed by police. It wasn't initially clear if the attacker was the only deceased person, but what French media are confirming this evening is that one person has been killed and at least one other person wounded. The attacker has been killed by police. As soon as we get more information on that, we'll bring it to you here on Sky News. In the meantime, let's return to our extended report, our special report on the UK's broken asylum system. Becky Johnson, who brought us that report, joins us now in the studio. Becky, so much to talk about in that report. It's difficult to know where to start, but this was just a snapshot. This was one city in the UK. This was Hull. But what you saw there will be replicated right across the UK. You just saw the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, one city with an estimated 300 to 400 failed asylum seekers. You know, the numbers are huge, and the stats that we've obtained paint a really damning picture of how the asylum system has been run in recent years. You know, a decade from 2011 to 2020, where there's no record of more than 55,000 failed asylum seekers leaving the country. So it's possible, and nobody actually knows exactly how many of these people are still here, but it is possible there are tens of thousands of people with no right to be in the UK, no right to work here, no right to benefits. As the charity worker in my report said, hiding in plain sight because nobody from the government has removed them. They receive letters saying that the government will assist them if they want to return. But, you know...
It's up to them to go voluntarily.
Exactly.
Rather
the people we met have never been
threatened
with deportation in that time. And, you know, we've got a response to our report from the Home Office. I'll read you that now. A spokesperson said, "We stand firm on our long-standing policy that those without a right to stay in the UK will be removed. Our Illegal Migration Act makes this possible, as people who enter the UK illegally will have their asylum claims and human rights claims declared inadmissible, and they will not be able to make a life here. Each asylum application is individually assessed, including decisions on removal of individuals. Where people have previously been refused asylum in the UK, a fresh asylum claim can be made through legal representation." I mean, it's tough talk, but in response to my report, a Home Office minister today admitted that the system is a merry-go-round. We're in an election year. Immigration is a massive issue. Politicians know that it is. That's why we often hear them talking tough, don't we? We hear about things like backlogs being cleared. We hear about a lot about small boats.
But you've just shown us the real picture.
Yeah, and you know, Labour have been talking tough as well in response to our report. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper saying that they would bring in a stronger returns and enforcement unit were they to win the election. Politicians know, though, that voters want to see action on this because there's been so much talk, but yet people keep coming in small boats. And as we've seen, thousands of people refused by the asylum system are still here in the country. Now, it's no good for those failed asylum seekers. It's a system that is not actually serving anyone. And I think whichever side of the political debate you look at this from, few could argue with the sentiment that the asylum system as it currently is broken. The Rwanda bill is back in Parliament. Look, the government have had so many legal and political difficulties with that bill, but they know that voters want to see action on this, and that's why Rishi Sunak in particular has burnt so much political capital on trying to get that through.
OK, Becky, thank you. Becky Johnson, our communities correspondent there. You can read more about it on our website, skynews.com. Thank you. Well, if you or anyone you know has been affected by the issues raised in Becky's report tonight, help is available. The Samaritans are on 116123. Their email, joe@samaritans.org. Still to come here on the UK Tonight, we'll have the details as a damning report finds children unsure of their gender identity have been let down by the NHS. Also coming up, money for medals. Athletics becomes the first sport to offer prize money to Olympians. And I'm going to be joined here in the studio by the 11-year-old author helping to write off homelessness.
In order to affect policy change, we need good scientific foundation for our campaigning work. And so I'm very pleased to say that Andrew Knight and Emily Davis reviewed 42 pieces of published scientific peer-reviewed literature looking at the health and welfare of tigers, in particular kept in circus environments. They looked at several things. They looked at their nutrition, their environment, behavioural interactions, their health and their mental health too. And they found that all of these were unsurprisingly compromised by the small enclosures, the constant travelling, the inaccessibility of proper food, as you've mentioned, the exposure to loud noises and crowds, exposure to other animals too. And this was very clearly, as a result of their investigation, not an environment where we should continue to keep tigers. Now, obviously in the UK, this has been phased out, but I'm very sad to say that across Europe, we still see a large number of big cats being kept in circuses, and it's a serious issue. Well, constant campaigning over many years, lots of agencies got together and pointed out the inadequacies of, our ability to keep animals when they were travelling like this. They're significantly compromised. So, when you think that a tiger, for instance, in the course of its day in the wild would roam over 50 square kilometres, and its exercise area when it's in a travelling circus is a few square metres, it was never going to work. And, Wales jumped first, and then we had changes in Scotland, Northern Ireland, England the last to move, but we're not going to see wild animals in travelling circuses in the UK. But as I say, unfortunately, in Germany and France, in Spain, these are still very common. And some of these animals end up in the UK because they're being rescued. We see that they have been declawed. The mutilation of circus animals is also frequent. They cut their claws off to make it safer, of course, when they're handling them. They saw their teeth off, and this instigates long-term health difficulties.
The author of a landmark review of gender services says children are being let down by a lack of research and weak evidence to support medical intervention. Paediatrician Dr. Hilary Cass published her long-awaited report today in response to concerns from whistleblowers about the care being given to young people seeking gender treatment. Well, the report calls for an urgent review of current policies, and notably, it highlights the exceptional toxicity around gender issues, meaning NHS staff are scared to openly discuss their views. Sky's Molly Malone reports.
Out of the closet! Into the street! It is, as described in today's report, an exceptionally toxic debate about how children questioning their gender should be treated. Political posturing and polarisation, but still people at the centre of it all. Human rights! One of them is Jack, who started seeking gender identity treatment a decade ago. He's now on an adult waiting list for hormone treatment, but wants today's review to change things in the future.
I wish that it had been more open and that it had been, more of a safe space where I felt like I could have spoken and been honest with people, and that not felt like I had to prove myself. There are children that have been let down by the service in multiple different ways. What I hope is that with this new service, with the recommendations that Cass is making, that a service can be created that lets less people down.
Dr. Cass's review said children have been let down by remarkably weak evidence on medical interventions, recommending an extremely cautious approach in the future if hormone treatments used to delay the onset of puberty are given before the age of 18. She suggests holistic care needs to be taken when assessing children, and that mental health or neurodevelopmental considerations are made, and says it's possible that a child's social transition, where they use a different name or pronoun, can change the trajectory of their development. It's that language that some in the trans community are worried about.
We have a number of concerns. So some of those are about the way that things are framed very ambiguously and the fact that they are very open to misinterpretation, particularly around areas such as social transition, access to gender-affirming hormones, and puberty blockers.
Have you felt that has made a difference?
What has made a difference is the political argument. The report made clear other healthcare services are not discussed or debated like gender treatments. The Prime Minister, though, on a trip today to talk about crime, welcomed the review's recommendations.
It's very much in alignment with our way of thinking, which is to exercise extreme caution on these issues because we simply do not know the long-term consequences and impacts.
The NHS say they've made progress in shutting down the Tavistock Centre, the once centralised clinic for child gender treatment, as it failed to meet standards while referrals soared.
This is not just the Tavistock, this is a whole cultural problem that there's been there. People have been frightened, and that is now changing. The pendulum has swung, and the Cass report gives a huge momentum to that pendulum.
New regional clinics are opening up to replace it, and the NHS has new policies too, on stopping the routine prescription of puberty blockers. But still, the conversation and the criticism will be loud, online and offline. Legal disputes, protest and rows about rights. Molly Malone, Sky News.
A little earlier, I spoke to Marcus Evans, a psychoanalyst and former governor of the Tavistock NHS Trust. He resigned in 2019 over how the service was being managed. He told me NHS Gender Services have had the wrong priorities.
We've been embarking on a live experiment that has lacked an evidence base, really because the service got taken over by and preoccupied with political preoccupations and ideological thinking rather than clinical thought, in which, usually you would be very interested in the research, you're interested in the downside of treatment, there's always clinical debates. And this has been absent for a long time.
Something that's not discussed in society enough, and it seems not in the medical profession enough, is the fact that when children are questioning their gender identity, often it's not just about gender, and there's talk about clinicians not knowing enough, being too frightened to air their views, and GPs, when a child comes to them talking about gender identity, instead of exploring other issues with them, they immediately refer them.
The thing is, two things come together. You see, the kids, I've described this sort of turbulence that the kid's dealing with. What tends to happen is there's a wish to sort of narrow down your focus. So there's an idea that the ideology presents you with, which is you've got one problem with one solution. Now, human beings are complicated. We've got many different moving parts. And that usually what one would do would look behind the presenting symptom to broaden out the picture. Who is this kid? What are they struggling with? What sort of trauma is in the background, the dynamics of the family. But rather than doing that, by going down this narrow specialist sort of direction, that the team, with their preoccupations that it's all to do with gender, meet with the patient who's also narrowing down their focus. And the whole history of the Tavistock is to do the opposite. It's to look at the person as a whole, rather than getting fixed on, as you say, this one aspect of life called gender. There are many different aspects of life. We're complicated, and psychologically we should be thinking in complex and complicated ways about who this kid is.
Marcus, we've been talking about gender identity being an outlier in terms of treatment, but it's also an outlier within NHS services. It almost gets treated as a standalone specialist subject, and that in itself is harmful. And Dr. Cass talks about the toxic nature of the debate, and it's holding clinicians back. It's making them frightened of doing their job effectively.
What you're told is that, you see, usually in medicine, you come to a sort of consensus by a sort of debate and discussion. And sometimes our reservations and the people who've been blowing the whistle, we're told, well, there are two sides to this argument. The problem is that you've got some clinicians that are ideologically captured. They don't take an interest in research or the downside of treatment. And then you've got others, I'm one of them, that is questioning what we're doing and the lack of interest in research. So there is no real dialogue. And the problem then is it looks like there's a dialogue between different parties. In actual fact, people are talking different languages. You've got a sort of political ideology talking to a clinical culture, and the two just don't talk to one another. And this has been very damaging because it's meant that the issue hasn't really been thrashed out. Then your second point is about the way that people like myself, I was saying to someone else, you know, I was dismissed as someone who didn't know what I was talking about and maybe transphobic. I've been in psychiatry for 45 years. I'm a psychoanalyst. I used to run a department at the Tavistock. So suddenly I've become a bigot just because of what I'm saying. They treated Dave Bell in the same way. You know, it's just to sort of get rid of the messenger, basically. And that has been another problem that has shut down this discussion. It's why it had to be taken outside the trust to the judicial review, and then the government brought in Cass, which was the game changer, because no one could dismiss Hilary Cass and what she's done as being bigoted and just against trans kids. It's a hard accusation to make that stick, whereas Dave and I and Sue could be dismissed in that way.
Well, with me now in the studio, Hayley Clark, who underwent hormone and puberty blocker treatment when she was at school. You may recognise Hayley from Big Brother, but she's a youth worker and vocal on this issue because it's something so personal to you, Hayley.
Yes.
So we really appreciate you coming in and taking the time. Let's talk about your experience. Your transition started when you were 13?
13. So I came out as trans in 2018. And I just remember on the first day of year 9 walking into school in a skirt, and the feeling was very euphoric. And then 2 years down the line, I finally got my first appointment with the NHS at the Tavistock Centre, and 2 years on the waiting list. I consider myself very lucky, although that is still a long time, because you could be on the waiting list for up to 6 years, which is extremely long. And the day before I was actually meant to get my puberty blockers and my hormones, the NHS was sued, and I was no longer able to get my puberty blockers. Another delay. So I went down the private route, which was best for me, but my family, to keep up with the payments at the time, we weren't financially able to afford that. So my mum actually put herself into debt. But then also I consider myself very lucky to have a family like that, because not many people do. So for some people, that is not even an option, and so they go without, and then that affects their mental health severely. The whole thing's heartbreaking, really, to think about. And then, I've been on puberty blockers and hormones for 3 years now, and I'm happy as ever.
Yeah.
And I'm confident and comfortable in my skin.
Yeah. Let's talk about this review today, because Dr. Cass, leading paediatrician who's authored this review, has sort of said that puberty blockers are essentially default in terms of if a young person is questioning their gender, the medical route is pretty easy to go down. She wants a more holistic approach where there is more psychotherapy, more attention paid to mental health. GPs should be involved more rather than at that initial meeting with the GP going, right, I'm going to refer you to a specialist area of the NHS. What was your experience like? How did you get into that pathway? Did you go to your GP first?
So
what else were you offered?
I did end up going to my GP, and my GP were awful at sending the referral off. So it was actually my school that done most of the work, and it was my mentor that actually pushed and got me my first appointment. So the GP was awful. Even now, being private and trying...
When you say awful, did they dismiss you? Did they not take you seriously?
Like they did. It felt like I was dismissed and they didn't take me very seriously. And even now, the support of me trying to go through the NHS, because although I'm still going private, I am still trying to get my puberty blockers and hormones via the NHS. Still, it feels like I get dismissed and there's really no help or support. And sometimes I go in, it's like they don't really know what to do.
The report does say that clinicians are scared to talk openly about these issues, scared to question young people when they come in, saying that they don't feel like they're in the right body. In any other area of the NHS, if you go in with chest pain, you might go in and say, I feel this, and a clinician would ask you questions, challenge, explore. This review seems to say that that doesn't happen. It's an affirmation policy, and that young person is believed and they're put on a pathway. What this review seems to be saying is you need to look at the bigger picture. Like you said, not every child comes from a loving family that understands and knows what's best for their child. What was your reaction to that part of the review? Because that was the tone it was setting, a more cautious approach going forward for young people.
I mean, as a medical professional, you shouldn't feel afraid to share your opinion, because that's what you're trained to do. You're trained to share your opinion. I feel
this has become so toxic. That's what the report says.
But I don't like that
People
word
feel
toxic.
Okay.
I don't like the word toxic being used because also I feel kind of undermined in the sense that I know who I am and I don't know why you're doubting who I am, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do.
So I don't like the use of the word toxic, and that whole GPs scared to share their opinions. I don't understand it, because as a medical professional, your job is to share your medical opinion.
There are young people who do go into the NHS questioning their gender. Some of them don't transition for various different reasons. Everybody's different.
Yes.
You know, those questioning their gender identity are not all the same person. And some transition and then detransition. Do you think the system is well set up to provide individual care? Because we know the NHS is so stretched. We've been talked about mental health services being part of this new approach for gender services.
But not at all. I feel like it's really important for young trans people to have a space where they feel safe and respected to explore their gender identity and have access to medically transition. I'm not an advocate for saying that people should get medication without being thoroughly vetted or going through the correct steps, but equally it's as damaging to refuse to give them the medication that they so desperately need or are suffering without. So I think it's all about creating a space where they can freely explore their gender identity and feel safe doing so and respected.
What do you want to see going forward? The Tavistock Centre, which was controversial for so many reasons, you know, you went there. What was it like? It's now closed. They're now opening regional hubs. What do you hope that gender services are going to look like for young people from this point on if the recommendations of the report are taken up?
I would say more fast-paced in the sense that appointments are closer together and just letting more people in. That's what I want to see, letting more people in, because I feel like the more you push people away, the more they're going to feel like there's no one around to support them. Because again, going back to people that don't have such supportive families, if you're going to your GP or your doctor or whoever and you feel like you're being dismissed or...
That should be a safe space,
Exactly,
right?
that should be your safe space and you're not getting that. And so I feel like just letting young people in and giving them advice and letting them talk and asking the right questions and not feeling like the young people are under pressure is really important.
OK. Hayley, really good of you to come in and share your experiences.
Thank you
so much. Hayley Clark there, reacting to the CAS review out today, looking at gender services within the NHS. Thank you. Still to come here in the UK tonight, I'm going to be joined by a young author who has just published her 4th book, all the proceeds going to charity. And we'll be talking about Trigger, the golden retriever who is retiring after fathering more than 300 puppies for the Guide Dogs breeding programme. Now, our next guest is a published author whose fourth book has just been released, and she is only 11 years old. She is Sarah Kito, and she donates the proceeds from all her books to charity. In fact, she's helped renovate a school library in Ghana, and the sales of her latest book is going to help homeless charities close to where she lives in Croydon. Well, I'm delighted to say that Sarah joins me in the studio now, along with her very proud dad, Albert. Welcome to you both. Sarah, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. I understand that you love to read books, but what made you pick up a pen and write your own books?
So, especially when I was younger, like during the lockdown, I read a lot, but the only problem was I didn't really see lots of books that had people who looked like me in it. So one of my inspirations is that I wanted to put my own face into my own book. And then also another thing is most of my books, it's I got inspiration through my past experiences. And that is and also my family values, and that is what really inspired me to write these books.
Well, Sarah, they do say write about what you know, and how exciting, putting yourself into these books as different characters, what amazing adventures you can have. You wrote 2 of your books aged 7. I thought it was 9, but you corrected me before we went on air. You were 7 when you wrote 2 of them. And at the grand old age of 11, you're celebrating your 4th book, Amma and the Lost Key. What did you want to write about? Let's just have a look at it here. Here's Amma. I can see the likeness here, Sarah. Very good. Talk to me about the stories, the adventures you wanted to write about.
So, with this book, it was mainly inspired by my trip to Ghana last year. So most of the things, for example, in one of the pages over here, it shows her feeding and like doing her chores out in the garden, like feeding the chickens and the goats, and that's something that I did.
This is the school you went to visit in Ghana, is it?
Yes, that's the school I went to visit, and that is the library that I am refurbishing. That's the school library I'm refurbishing, and the project's going really well. I'm really enjoying it.
Amazing. And Albert, you must be so proud of what your daughter's doing. Incredible to be a published author. But the philanthropy at such a young age, to donate all the proceeds to worthy causes.
Yes, I am very proud of her, and the philanthropic aspect of her work is what marvels me the most. But not too surprised, because at a very tender age of 6, we have family values where we normally, Christmas time, we do packages and give to charities around, like homeless people around, and we saw that joy that brought to her. So when she wrote the book and showed it to me, and she actually came back and said, I wanted to donate the money to charity, I was surprised, but I wasn't too surprised.
That's incredible. And I love the fact that you've got merch on as well to raise a bit of extra money for the charities. Who's your favourite author? Who inspires you, Sarah?
So I have 2 of my 2 favourite authors. One of them is Alicia Dixon.
And why do you like Alicia so much?
Not just because of Britain's Got Talent, but also her book series, Lightning Girl, was one of the first book series I saw with the main character looking like me. Like, she had an afro, like this puff you see on me now, she had a puff, but even bigger, and that really inspired me. I can put my face in my own book.
I love that, because, you know, she's inspired you. And do you know what? You're pretty inspirational yourself. I think you've inspired Alicia as well. Do you want to look into camera 11? Because we've got a rather special message for you, Sarah.
Okay. Hi, Sarah, it's Alicia here. How are you, my darling? I just wanted to send you a message to say congratulations on your 4th book. I've heard all about it and what you're doing. That's incredible. You are really inspiring. I read your article in the newspaper. It was very touching. You know, it's because of people like you that I do what I do. And hearing your story validates that and motivates me to keep going. I want to inspire the next generation. I'm thrilled that Lightning Girl was so special to you, because that was the intention of that book. So sending you all the luck, all the love in the world. I hope to meet you one day. Enjoy your night tonight. Mwah.
Well, Sarah, what do you think of that?
Yeah, when I got the email that I was invited here, I was hoping that Alicia would be seen.
Well, she's seen you, she's heard of you. In fact, this book here, should we sign this and send it to Alicia? I think you need to sign that, and we will get it to Alicia Dixon. Sarah, thank you so much for coming in to see us. We'll make sure that gets to Alicia Dixon. Albert, very inspiring daughter you have. And Sarah, best of luck. You're going to be an author forever now. This is it. Get through school and you can go into writing full-time. There we go, handshaking, signing it to Alicia Dixon. Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us on the UK Tonight. Good luck. Thank you. Well, still to come here on the programme, how do we follow that? We'll try with a bit of athletics, shall we? It's going to be the first sport to introduce prize money at the Olympics this summer. We'll be talking about that next with our sports presenter, Teddy Draper.
And coming up,
at the top of the hour how Arizona took the United States back 160 years with a new law banning abortion. Plus, the ultra runner Russ Cook joins me in the studio after completing his epic run across Africa. We'll hear what it was like from the man they call the hardest geezer. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim, at 9.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent. My most memorable story was, and still is, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann.
Please, please do not hurt her. Please give our little girl back.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. For detectives, the first 48 hours after a murder are crucial in the search for clues. The public expects them to find Jill Dando's killer soon. The British detectives are planning to meet forensic experts, academics, and even witch doctors. I remember the grimmest case, the Soham murders of schoolgirls Holly and Jessica. I felt I can't undo what's happened, but I can help explain it. Ian Huntley was arrested and charged within a fortnight of the murders.
I've never murdered anyone, I've never raped anyone. What am I in jail for?
The parole board has to decide if Bronson needs to be kept locked up for the safety of the public. My biggest challenge was to persuade a jailed diamond thief to answer my letters. Martin Brunt, Sky News, at the Old Bailey.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. We aim to be the best and the most trusted place for news.
Teddy's here with a roundup of today's sport, and we're going to talk about a really interesting development for athletes who will be competing at the Olympics. Remind us exactly what's been announced today. It sort of came out of the blue, didn't it?
Well, it has, because since 1896, when Pierre de Coubertin, a Frenchman, resurrected the Olympics in honour, he said, of the amateur greats of Athens thousands of years ago, it was amateur, it was about stronger, higher, faster, together is the new line, but now they're going to be paid. All the world athletics people are going to be paid. So that's track and field, 48 events, going to cover all the sprints, the shot put, the decathlon, the heptathlon as well. And Lord Sebastian Coe actually was on Sky News earlier, just outlining why there's been resistance to this, of course, because of the intrinsic motivation it's supposed to be to win a gold medal. But the announcement today that it's $50,000 for a gold medal, £39,400. The total prize money... At
current exchange rates.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't actually calculate that myself, so reliably informed that that's the exchange rate currently. So it's a significant move, and there will be criticism of it. De Coubertin, in his time, actually backtracked a little bit and said that there wasn't enough working-class people in the early Olympics at the end of the 19th century, so perhaps they did need to remunerate people. And Seb Coe, picking up on that theme, really was pretty strong, justifying the whole situation to Mark Austin a little bit earlier on Sky News. You can hear a bit of that interview now.
We need to give the athletes, and I'm absolutely unashamed about this, we need to give the athletes a secure financial environment. Over our World Championship events, and we have some 14 over a 4-year cycle, we have a prize money pot of $24 million. And this is on top of that.
So, Teddy, which Brits maybe with a chance of securing some prize money in Paris.
Well, it's funny hearing from Lord Coasney, because I think younger people know him as the great administrator who brought the Olympics to London, and what he's doing now as the president of the World Athletics Committee. But he was a great runner himself, two-time 1,500 metres gold champion, 1980 in Moscow, 1984 in Los Angeles. And what I've been looking at here potentially is a fascinating showdown between two friends in the 1,500 metres for Team Great Britain, Josh Kerr and Jake Whiteman. Jake grew up in England, but with Josh Kerr, they went up to Scotland, and they've been firm friends ever since. Both represent Scotland. So Whiteman actually won the World Championships in 2022, was injured last year, and then cheered on Josh Kerr as he won the 1,500 metres World Championship. So there's a real significant subplot. Hopefully Whiteman is back fit and can challenge Kerr, who is the younger man by 3 years, but both still in their 20s. So that's a fascinating showdown. And then here's one that I think we're all rooting for, really, because she was tipped to be a fantastic success, Katarina Johnson-Thompson, in the heptathlon event. We've had great female succession with Denise Lewis in 2000, of course, Jessica Ennis-Hill in London 2012, and she's been plagued by injuries. 2 times she's been there. 2016 Rio knee problem, and then she had an Achilles tendon issue last time out, but hopefully she's fit at the age of 31 and can come good with a gold medal and get $50,000. But that's later on in the summer. In the meantime, before we think of the Olympics, let's talk about football and its Champions League quarter-final first leg time again. We'll have updates in a second.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Well, I want to know how sustainable you are, Sebastian, because you're only 36. You've only been out the Formula One for a year and a bit. Are you potentially on the driver market for next season?
Well, potentially I am, because I haven't got a drive. But the question is, am I looking for one? I think it depends on the on the package. I retired from Formula One not to come back, but I also did say that you never know. So I think it still stands. Obviously, there's things that I miss, which is mostly the competition, and things that I don't miss. So yeah, that hasn't changed. Obviously, life is very different if you're not involved.
I just want to press you a bit on the now or never aspect of maybe coming back, because as I said...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Let's have a quick look at the weather. The rest of the week is looking unsettled, further wind and rain, but southern parts will be drier over the weekend. Before then, grey and windy this evening with drizzly outbreaks, fog on coast and hills, and more general rain moving through the north and the west. Now, we always like to leave you with something weird or wonderful here on the UK Tonight, and this is about a guide dog named Trigger, also known as the dog father. He is retiring after fathering more than 300 puppies. Here he is, the 9-year-old golden retriever, fathering 39 litters with a grand total of 323 puppies for Banbury Guide Dogs. The charity said that Trigger's wonderful gentle nature and excellent health made him the perfect asset. He is now retiring in Banbury, where his volunteer for the past 7 years will officially adopt him. That's all for tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night at 8.